Hello, I'm Thomas Mancala, and in today's video, I'm going to teach you how to become a font snob. The first and most important rule to being a font snob is to hate these fonts no matter what, but the most important one to hate is this one. In order to really hammer home that you're a font snob, you need to let people know that even looking at these fonts will in fact make your eyes bleed and will make you physically ill regardless of context. Next, you need to know the lingo. You've got to be able to talk the talk. So here's a few important words you should know. The first word you should know is serifs, although if you're a true font snob, you should pronounce it serifs. Serifs are these things on letters. Another important thing you should know is X height. X height is simply just the height of the X in a certain font. After that, we've got ascenders and descenders. Ascenders go above the X line, and descenders go below the X line. You've got to know that this A and G are one-story A and Gs, and these A and Gs are two-story A and Gs. It is crucial that you know the difference between tracking and kerning. Tracking adjusts the space between all the letters, and kerning adjusts the space between individual letters. After that, you need to know weight, and weight is just simply how thick the font is. The final term you should know isn't really related to fonts, but you should still know it, and that's drop cap. Drop caps are just the big letter at the beginning of a chapter. There, now that you know the lingo, let's go over the types of fonts. Fonts can typically be broken up into 4 categories: serifs, sans serifs, scripts, and decorative fonts. Serif fonts are pretty self-explanatory. They have serifs. Now sans means without, so sans serifs means without serifs, so they don't have serifs. Script fonts typically look like cursive or really fancy writing. And decorative fonts are pretty self-explanatory. They're decorative, but they're not scripts. Now each of these groups has their own subcategories, but we're only going to talk about some in the serifs, because most of the others are just so far beyond a font normie's scope that they're hardly even worth mentioning. The ones that are worth mentioning are old style, slab serifs, and moderns. Old style fonts typically have a diagonal stress, slight contrast between thick and thin, and have standard serifs. Our next category is slab serif fonts. Now these are sometimes referred to as Egyptian fonts because a lot of them have Egyptian names, and that's because when these fonts became really popular, it was right after the Rosetta Stone was found, and they found out that if you named your font after something Egyptian, it would sell better, even though they aren't even closely related to anything Egyptian. Now slab serif fonts feature typically vertical stress or no stress, very little contrast between thick and thin, and their most prominent feature is their big fat serifs that look like slabs, hence the name slab serifs. Now the final subcategory of fonts that we're going to talk about is modern fonts. Modern style fonts feature vertical stress, very high contrast between thick and thin strokes, and usually thin horizontal serifs. Now just knowing this information isn't what makes you a font snob. It's crucial that you make sure other people know that you know this information. A good way to do this is to point out what style of font is at any given chance. See some text on a billboard? Let them know what style of font that is. Reading a menu at a restaurant? Let them know. Bonus points for if you can say something along the lines of, "Oh, I would have put this style in place of this style." So now we know the fonts that make our eyes bleed, some of the language used with fonts, and we know the main styles of fonts. So now that we have all this information, it's time to use it by delivering criticism. It's very important for a font snob to deliver criticism the right way. Now most people when they're delivering criticism try to do so politely and constructively. Not you. You're a font snob, not a font bitch. The only proper way to offer criticism is with this phrase. This is basically unreadable. Did somebody choose a font that makes you physically ill? This is basically unreadable. Is their tracking or kerning slightly off? This is basically unreadable. The magic of this phrase is that it works in just about any situation. But it's not just the phrase, it's also the way you deliver it. It needs to be said in a way that makes it very clear that you even having to glance at it was a monumental waste of your precious time. In order to properly achieve this, it's usually best to give a shocked or confused look followed by a scoff. Then you hit them with your phrase. Now it's very important that you don't follow up with any reasoning. It's their atrocious mistake to figure out. Simply hand back their refuse, or if you want to save them a step, simply crumple it up and toss it into the nearest wastebasket. This will also make you look cooler if you make it. Now the last thing you need to know in order to become a font snob is that every font choice that's ever been made has been wrong. But if you had been there to make that choice for them, you would have saved that design. It's a heavy burden being a font snob, but somebody needs to do it. If you've made it this far in the video, you've officially been blessed with the knowledge to become a font snob. Now it's important that you don't waste this power that's been bestowed to you. Make sure everyone you meet knows you have this power. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Thomas Manculla, and congrats on being a font snob.